So we're going to go ahead and start and watch some of the videos that we have available here. I'm just going to work our way through the projects that we have. They're turned in just in alphabetical order, how you've named them here. It's going to be a group critique, so people will get multiple videos, and we'll just share that. So I'll go through them relatively quickly. We're going to start with Andrew Caldwell. Open this up, full screen it, and watch it. Overall, again, I'm going to mainly focus on the animation. The animation looks pretty good, but there's a couple of spots where the timing seems a little inconsistent. So, like we'll see here, the amount of time it takes it to travel, takes the ball to travel from here to here, kind of slows down in comparison to the speed that it travels across the entire screen. So it kind of slows down, and then when it hits there, it kind of speeds up again. So I think keeping the speed kind of consistent, not even consistent, but no, let me rephrase that. Not constant, but consistent. You know, that it seems like it's making sense. Like, what force is it that drives it upwards right here at the end? And there's a couple of them like that, where it hits the wall and then speeds up. Like right there was one. And so playing with that speed and just making sure that the timing feels right for the amount of force that is going into it. So when it ricochets off of a paddle, it may lose a little bit of energy and slow down just a little bit. But if the paddle is moving and maybe puts a little bit more force behind it, then maybe it speeds up. So taking into account the timing of how quickly something is moving based off of what forces are acting on it, will kind of give you a little bit of that change there. I think that the a couple of things to think about is kind of how this is presented. It's really a tiny box right here in the center of this gigantic video. The render is, I'm not exactly sure what's going on in the render. I think this is a texture on the background here. And it's, you've done some interesting things to it, but I'm not really gauging it too much on the render. With the exception of the render does sort of change how we are able to see the action. And so the ball not being very bright maybe makes it a touch harder to see or something like that. So the big thing on this though is just kind of keeping sort of consistency and a believable reason of why the ball is moving. And for everyone who's kind of following this one, you're probably going to hear that feedback quite a bit. So let's just go ahead and move on through them and talk about them a little bit more. Okay, Haston Carter. Okay, so we watch this. This one's interesting. I don't know if you changed up the original models or actually went through and did your own models. But you got some really nice stuff going on here, including not so much even in the render, but you've kind of done some neat things with sort of the way that the paddle's impact affects the ball's speed. And so we get a little bit right there at the end that when it bounces off the ground, it kind of picks up speed a little bit there, and I'm not really sure why. Also, we do kind of get a little bit of contact with it there, so maybe you'd want to tweak that just a little bit to where it misses it. But I like some of the stuff you have going on early on here, where you have the ball kind of hitting it at an angle, or the paddle kind of hitting it at an angle drives it a little bit more energy into it. And so that's why it speeds up there a little bit, and that makes sense. And then the other one is when it's coming at the paddle here, and the paddle kind of just sort of settles in and lets it hit pretty cleanly, and that sort of slows the ball down. And so this feels very realistic to how the game mechanics work. And it just feels pretty natural. There's a couple of spots where maybe the speed or the angles are a little off. We get this angle here, or the ball is coming at the ground at that angle, and it kind of bounces off at a slightly different angle. And I think just playing around with that a little bit, you could have done just kind of had it maybe go upward at a sharper angle and have it connect maybe up here or something. It's very nitpicky stuff, so very small comments there. So let's move on to HTML Sturgill. So this is always a telltale sign when it opens up and it's kind of small like this. That means it was rendered or exported out at kind of the wrong resolution. But we can kind of sidestep that and kind of look at the animation on its own. A couple of things that I'm noticing happening here. Let's see. I don't know if we're dropping a frame there or what, but as the animation, as the ball comes here, it's like it never actually makes contact with the paddle there. And this may have been in the compression if you animated it, and it kind of does it again here. If you animated it at 24 frames per second, but then this is playing it at 3 or something like that, then what you may be doing is you may be losing a frame in there, or vice versa, you may be losing a frame, and that lost frame is the contact point. So if that's what's going on, then that's just something to work out with the frame rate. But otherwise, it's sort of an attention to detail thing that you need to be able to make sure that objects are making contact for that force to feel believable. Otherwise, let me watch it one more time, sort of see the entire. Timing-wise, it's actually relatively good. Speeds up at a couple of spots there. So like where we would see maybe here, it's traveling at the ground, and then it kind of speeds up there just a little bit after it hits the wall. So maybe that's just a very slight change in the pacing there. Let me check how much time I got left in this video. Okay, about halfway through this one. These videos are sort of limited to a 15-minute time length. Let's pop this one up and launch it. Okay. It's pretty interesting. I think it's neat that you don't really have them moving very much. It's kind of a boring game of Pong that they're playing. This first little twitch that your first paddle makes as it comes in here to catch it feels a little bit sharp, like it's moving maybe over one frame instead of maybe like two or something like that. Some of these really slight, like small nudges that you're getting here are kind of nice. Some of the other paddle stuff, like right here, it kind of nudges up and catches that. That's pretty nice. Thing that's kind of odd to me, and this is just kind of a logistics thing, is it goes out of bounds on the side when in all of the others it's actually just ricocheting off the side. So that doesn't completely make sense to me. I feel like it should go out like back here in the back, which is kind of how the rules of Pong go. But otherwise, I think you're getting some pretty neat stuff in here, other than a few pops. So when I started playing really jumpy, you're getting a couple of spots where I feel like the arc of I feel like the direction of the ball is actually changing. So we'll see it right there. You can kind of feel like it kind of curves in a little bit. And then right here before it hits right here, kind of feels like it's coming straight forward, and it kind of curves up a little bit right there at the end. My suspicion is that has to do with your curves, and that you maybe still have something set to flat tangents or auto tangents instead of breaking those tangents and getting a cleaner line there. So let's go ahead and move on. Matt. Okay. interesting. Couple of little things. One, I like the little flip that this one does to catch the ball right there. Otherwise, though, some of the motion of these are feeling a little linear, like they're very evenly spaced. Of the paddles, I mean. The ball is actually working relatively well, with the exception as it's coming down here right at the end. You'll watch this as it happens here, right here at the end. Kinda feel like it speeds up right there, or changes directions, almost like it's like curves there a little bit. So I think that you could probably play with the paddles and make them feel a little bit more natural, like they're really being controlled by a person, not just a... Like right now they're kind of moving like linearly up and down. I think you could probably play a little bit with the timing there to get them to feel a little more interesting. But overall that's working pretty well. I think the other paddle coming in and sort of beating down the first paddle is kind of funny. I'm not really sure why the ball comes back, but I guess it's a... I guess I don't have to understand. It's a make-believe game of Pong, but otherwise I think it's working pretty well. Yeah, again, that curve in the motion feels kind of weird, and sort of the linear, like robotic movements of these, I think you could probably play with that and give that a little bit more of an interesting touch to it. And I think we probably got enough time for maybe one or two more here. WMV. Different. Let's see if this will play. Come on. So this is a different take on it. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later. We'll actually be doing more bouncing balls. I think it's an interesting attempt at it, and it's pretty ambitious. So something we'll notice, and this is again when we start talking about the bouncing ball a little bit more, you'll notice that as the ball comes down toward the ground, it kind of feels like it slows down a little bit before it contacts the ground. And that's just another thing that we would edit in the curves, and we'll talk about that once we get into the bouncing ball. But that's something that I think would really kind of improve this one quite a bit. Also, I guess this kind of has some of the same issues even that the other more 2D ones have, which is at times it feels like it speeds up or slows down just a touch. Like right here on this one, that it kind of slows down as it's heading toward the ground, and it kind of speeds back up to go toward the paddle. And again, that's sort of a tangent issue, but it may also be a timing issue, like how many frames are in that second section of animation. So it needs a little bit of work, but overall it's a very neat idea, and a little bit more of an elaborate take on it. You get some pretty neat paddle swipes out of it. Um, so cool. Let's move on. Gavin. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I got enough time on this one. Let's see. Not. Okay, there we go. Yeah, that's pretty neat. This one has a couple of the timing issues we talked about in the past, where kind of like it's not very many. It's actually right here at the end, right before right here as the ball contacts the ground. It kind of speeds up just a little bit and heads toward here, toward this paddle, and then it kind of feels like it freezes right before it goes off the screen. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not to kind of show that the game was over. Um, but if that's intentional, that's actually looks pretty good. If it wasn't intentional, consider how it worked, and how to make that intentional when you want that to happen. Um, but otherwise, I think this is working pretty well. You get some pretty nice movement on the paddles as well. So, okay, we're about out of time, so I'll pick this up in the next video.